In a cold winter morning on January 6, 1999, the operator of a tugboat in the city of Vistula, Poland, noticed something was caught in the propeller of the boat's engine. They weren't supposed to travel a long distance, so the man postponed checking the propeller until the next day. On January 7, he went to the engine hatch of the tugboat. While inspecting the propeller, the operator expected to find a piece of rubber or a tree branch, but as he got closer to the propeller, a very strong and unpleasant smell reached his nose. When he bent down to look at the propeller up close, he was faced with a lump that resembled a sack or bag, which was light and whitish in color, and something that looked like human flesh was attached to it. The operator removed what he had found from the boat's propeller, and it was revealed to be human skin. The police were immediately notified, and after examining the remains and conducting a DNA test, they found that the skin belonged to a 23-year-old girl named Katarzyna Zowada. The first theory that came to the police's mind was that the body had been destroyed by the boat's propeller, and the skin they found was the remaining part of Katarzyna's dismembered body. It seemed logical. For example, Katarzyna could have drowned in the river for some reason, and her body, carried by the current, reached the boat's propeller. In short, the police based all their theories on this idea. However, suddenly on January 14, 1999, 8 days later, Katarzyna Zowada's right leg was found in a river near the city of Vistula, and shortly after, pieces of the girl's clothes were found in another river. With a more careful examination, they realized that Katarzyna's body parts had not separated naturally but had been cut. The way the leg was separated indicated it was cut with a machine or a large knife, and most importantly, the skin of Katarzyna's upper body had been precisely and delicately removed from the bones. As mentioned, the skin that was caught in the boat's propeller had a bag-like shape. The person who had removed this skin from the victim's body had separated the ribs without causing much damage to the chest and abdomen area, and the skin on the shoulders was exactly like the sleeves of a t-shirt. The skin was precisely cut from the thigh and neck area up to the left ear. No face or arms were seen on the separated skin, and the victim's nipples had also been removed. According to forensic reports, the body had been in the water for about 2 to 3 weeks, and unfortunately, this had completely erased all traces of the killer from the body. Although no clues about the killer were found from the remains, during their investigation, the police discovered a detail that horrified everyone, based on how the skin was cut and the bones were separated. The person who had skinned Katarzyna Zowada clearly had a specific intention, and that was to make a suit. Who was Katarzyna Zowada? Katarzyna Zowada was a young Polish girl born on the first day of June 1975. She lived in a middle-class family and was not a very social person. All her acquaintances believed that Katarzyna was a very good girl but was extremely introverted and did not like to interact with others. It should be noted that Katarzyna was not always sad and introverted, but this feeling and behavior developed after her father's death in 1996. Her father's death had a bad impact on Katarzyna and caused her to suffer from severe depression at the age of 21. Before this event, she was studying psychology but then changed her major twice. First, she transferred from psychology to history and then to religious studies. Her academic situation was not going well, and during this time, at her mother's insistence, she visited a psychiatrist to treat and manage her depression. On November 12, 1998, Katarzyna's mother made an appointment for her daughter at the Nowa Huta Psychiatric Clinic. Katarzyna was supposed to go to the clinic that day and meet her mother there, but unfortunately, the 23-year-old girl never showed up at the psychiatrist's office. Katarzyna's mother waited for hours for her daughter, and when she saw there was no news of Katarzyna, she went to the police station and reported her daughter missing. But the police told her to wait and that it was too early to file a report. After a few days, Katarzyna's mother went back to the police, and they finally announced the girl's disappearance and opened a case for her. But no extensive investigations were carried out because there were many such cases, and there was no significant information about Katarzyna's disappearance. To put it another way, Katarzyna remained missing for about 2 months, until a t-shirt made from her skin was found. The book The Silence of the Lambs was published in 1981, and a movie was made from it in 1991, which won 5 Oscars. The Silence of the Lambs is one of the most famous psychological horror films and has a character named Buffalo Bill. Buffalo Bill is a fictional character. Although he was inspired by a number of real serial killers, he is not real. If you don't know anything about his character, I should say that Buffalo Bill is a serial killer who skins his victims and sews clothes for himself from this skin. Based on the explanations I just gave, in this case, the police theorized that the killer had removed Katarzyna's skin and made clothes from it because he was trying to copy the killer from The Silence of the Lambs. There was also a high probability that this murder was the first crime of a potential serial killer. What does this mean? The police believed that no one could commit such a horrible murder without a sound, so Katarzyna was probably the killer's first victim. On the other hand, when a person plans a murder so much and makes a suit from human skin with such precision, it means that they won't kill again and will finish their work with just this one case. These were the police's theories, and the entire case was based on theories because there was no trace of the killer, no lead. On May 31, 1999, around 1 p.m., the Krakow police received a call from an elderly man. This elderly man told the police that a murder had occurred in his house and that he believed the killer was still there. When the police arrived at the old man's house, a body was hanging upside down from the ceiling in the basement. The victim was a 50-year-old man whose head was completely separated from his body and his scalp and face skin had been carefully peeled off. The killer had made a mask from the victim's scalp and face skin, and the police were able to find this mask in the house. The killer was a Russian immigrant named Vladimir. Who was the victim? Vladimir's father, Vitalyich. That is, the son had killed his father, and his grandfather reported the murder to the police. The police spoke with the killer's grandfather, and the old man said that Vladimir had worn his father's clothes and face mask for a full day and pretended to be Vitalyich in front of his grandfather, whose eyesight was not good. Just imagine, the guy wore his father's severed face skin for a whole day and put on a show in front of his grandfather. Vladimir's grandfather said that his motive for killing his father was Vitalyич's betrayal of Vladimir's mother. Apparently, the father cheated on his wife, and then, without leaving any money or a house for her, he took his son and moved from Russia to Poland to live with his father and build a new life. Vladimir also hated his father for this and decided to do this to him. Overall, 3 cases of human skinning had occurred in the history of that region, and it was not far-fetched for the police to link Vladimir's case to Katarzyna's. On the other hand, Vladimir was a psychology student at the same university where Katarzyna was studying. If you recall, Katarzyna was also initially studying psychology but then changed her major. Vladimir was interrogated, and every question you can think of was asked of him, but it seemed that his crime had nothing to do with Katarzyna's disappearance. There was no evidence that Vladimir was responsible for Katarzyna's disappearance. In short, they could not find any connection between the 2 cases, and Vladimir was eventually sentenced to 25 years in prison. He served a few years of his sentence in Poland, and then, at his own request, was transferred to a Russian prison. As of this year, 2025, there has been no news about Vladimir's situation, but given the sentence he received, he is probably still in prison. A little earlier, I said that 3 cases of human skinning had occurred in the history of that region. One was Katarzyna, the other was Vladimir's father, and the third man was in 1983. A completely normal citizen named Jan who seemed normal and ordinary to everyone. One day decided to kill his teenage son and his wife and skin them, and then dismember their bodies and throw them in the river. What a normal decision for a father to make on a routine day. But his plan was left incomplete because he was arrested by the police before he could dismember the bodies and was then transferred to a psychiatric hospital. He stayed there for a few years and was then released due to his poor physical health and old age. This means that at the time of Katarzyna's disappearance, this man was free, but he was never on the police's list of suspects because his physical condition was very bad and he couldn't even handle his own personal matters, let alone kill and skin another person. I told you all this so you would understand that the police, due to the extreme lack of information regarding Katarzyna's murder, went through every murder and human skinning case in the city's history, hoping to reach a conclusion, but unfortunately, no progress was made in the case. A year later, in January 2000, the investigation into Katarzyna's murder was officially stopped because the killer had not been found. However, it should be noted that some police officers continued the searches and investigated every possible lead. During these unofficial investigations, the police found a DNA on Katarzyna's skin that did not belong to her. They compared this DNA with all the suspects and even the sex offenders in the city, but they did not reach a conclusion. How they found DNA on skin that had been in the water for 2 or 3 weeks, I don't know, especially after 1 year. The case remained in this state for 12 years until Katarzyna was exhumed in 2012, and the police, by examining the pieces of Katarzyna's pullover that were buried with her remains, found a relatively rare plant species and said that this plant species might be able to determine the crime scene. Also, based on how Katarzyna's skin and skin cells were separated, they realized that the victim had been tortured before her death. There is something about the Polish police that is very different from the American police, and that is that they do not publish the details of the cases as much as possible. For example, so far we have only read Katarzyna's surname and do not know the surnames of the other people involved in the case because they did not publicize it. This also applies to the causes and effects of the case investigations. That is, according to police reports, we know that Katarzyna was beaten for weeks before her death. The killer gave her drugs, sexually abused her, and used a sharp knife or blade to cut the victim's neck, armpits, and groin. But we don't know where the police got this information. Also, among the police reports, it is mentioned that the cause of death was most likely bleeding and excessive blood loss. According to forensic doctors' guesses, the victim was not alive when she was skinned and had lost her life due to the cuts on her neck, armpits, and groin. In 2004, the Polish police requested help from the American FBI, and an FBI representative provided a psychological profile of the suspect to the Polish people, which referred to the killer's sadistic tendencies. And finally, 18 years after Katarzyna's murder, the Polish police arrested a 52-year-old man named Robert Janczewski for the murder of Katarzyna Zowada on October 4, 2017. Apparently, Robert Janczewski was also one of the suspects in the case, even in the initial police investigations, but there was not enough evidence to convict him. In 2017, one of Janczewski's friends wrote a letter to the police and stated that this man was the killer and should be arrested. After this letter, they searched Janczewski's apartment piece by piece and finally found traces of Katarzyna's blood inside the bathroom and under Janczewski's bathtub. The police looked into Robert Janczewski's past and life and saw that the man was trained and professional in martial arts, had a history of abusing women, and had also visited Katarzyna Zowada's grave many times in the past 18 years. Robert previously worked at a zoological institute where animal bodies were often dissected. He had also been employed in this laboratory for a long time, but once during his shift, some of the laboratory rabbits were killed, and Robert was fired from his job because of this incident. The man did not provide any explanation as to what happened to the rabbits. After his arrest, Janczewski claimed that he had never seen Katarzyna Zowada and had no connection with her death. That is, he never pleaded guilty to the murder of this victim, and even said many times that he did not know Katarzyna at all. If you don't know her, how were traces of her blood found under your bathtub? Why did you even go to her grave? Robert Janczewski was arrested in the same year, 2017, and the man spent 6 years of his life in prison. According to Polish law, all information related to the trial was kept confidential, and we do not have any information about what sentence he received or which prison he was imprisoned in. The last news published about Janczewski is from 2018. In December 2018, the killer sued the prison guards for harassment and went to court. His statements were examined. It was determined that his words were baseless, and his complaint went nowhere. Unfortunately, the skull and other parts of Katarzyna Zowada's body were never found, and Robert Janchevsky has not said anything about exactly why and how he killed Katarzyna to this day.